This video is about applying for asylum in America. The first thing you must know is that there is a deadline to applying for asylum. You must submit your application within 1 year of your first arrival in America. You will need to submit Form I-589. This can be found on the USCIS website, along with detailed instructions. This is the Form I-589, application for asylum and for withholding of removal. This QR code will lead you to the USCIS website and the I-589 form. There are requirements for applying for asylum. You must show that you were persecuted in Afghanistan or fear future persecution if you had to return. That persecution must be because of your race, religion, gender, nationality, political opinion, or your membership in a particular social group. Persecution generally means serious harm. If you were physically hurt or wounded, that is likely persecution. This could include rape or sexual assault, kidnapping, confinement, torture, or other beatings. Persecution is not necessarily physical. Beyond the physical injury, the following might qualify as persecution: threats of physical violence, discrimination and economic persecution, such as not allowed to work anywhere, not being allowed to shop or to receive medical care, severe criminal extortion or robbery, such as someone forcing you to pay large sums of money to have your basic human rights, or someone forcing you to receive medical care against your will. It could also be overly harsh or severe punishment for committing a crime. If nothing discussed has already happened to you, but you have a good reason to believe something harmful would happen to you if you went back to Afghanistan, you may still qualify for asylum. It helps significantly to have a specific reason why you have fear of serious harm if you would return, and have a fear of future persecution. Think if anyone has threatened you. Do you know from the news that people like you are being targeted and harmed by the Taliban or other groups in Afghanistan? For example, women are being severely discriminated against by losing access to education, not being allowed to work, or are being forced into marriages. You could also see people who had the same job as you being targeted for their work. Or if you identify as LGBTQ and you see that the Taliban is harming other LGBTQ people. You will need proof. The government will not simply take your word for what happened to you or what you fear happening to you if you return to Afghanistan. You will need all the evidence you can get of everything that happened to you and be as detailed as possible. Remember to include English translations for anything if need be. First and foremost, you need a detailed sworn statement signed by you. Additional proof depends on what it is you're trying to prove. Here are some examples. If you were injured in the past, did you see a doctor after you were injured? Do you have any emails or other records that can demonstrate medical care that you received? Do you have photos of injuries that you received? Photos, if possible, should show your face. Do you have other witnesses who saw what happened to you? You can get a written and signed statement from them too. More detail on the specific protected groups. For gender, the Taliban's persecution of women make women good candidates. For political opinion, many of you were anti-Taliban, and your work for certain organizations may have demonstrated that. For particular social groups, these include things like people who worked for a U.S. entity or a U.S. affiliated entity, or LGBTQ, or other political organizations. You should talk to a lawyer to see if your group qualifies. You must establish a link. Your past persecution or fear of future persecution must be because of one of the protected grounds listed above. Examples of evidence that establish the link are statements by the Taliban that they are targeting people in those groups, news or other articles discussing that the Taliban has a history of targeting people in these groups, or any messages the Taliban sent to you or your family stating why you are being targeted. There are benefits of getting asylum. While your asylum application is pending, you can remain in the United States. 1 year after your asylum application is granted, you can apply for a green card or your legal permanent residency. Remember that this does not come automatically, and you will have to submit another application. If you get your green card, 5 years later you can apply for your U.S. citizenship, which is also not automatic. You will also be able to apply for a work permit 1 year after submitting your asylum application. Most of you will already have a work permit now, but it is set to expire in 2 years. So submitting an asylum application soon is very important. And you can get another work permit on the grounds for your asylum once your current one expires. Who can apply with you on your application? Your spouse and minor children can all apply together in one application. Women may have a stronger case given the Taliban's attitude towards women, so it's a good idea for husbands and wives to apply separately, as it gives the couple 2 chances. Parents, siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, aunts, and uncles may not be included in your asylum application. For Afghan applicants, USCIS is striving to conduct interviews 45 days after submitting an I-589 and issue a final decision within 150 days. This is a new goal. We do not yet know whether USCIS will be able to process the applications this quickly. Generally for asylum, the process takes several years. Asylum applications are completely free. There will be no filing fee or any cost to you unless you hire an attorney who has their own costs. If you've already applied for some other kind of status, you can still submit an asylum application. Your asylum application will not affect any other application. If your other application is granted, you can just withdraw your asylum application. And if you are denied your other pending applications, your asylum one can continue. You will have to send your application in by mail. You can look on the USCIS website for a list of states and the relevant address to send it to. We are now going to go to the I-589 form step by step. First, make sure that you check the box to apply for withholding of removal under the Convention Against Torture. You should always check this box when you're applying for your asylum. We'll then move on to information about you, the applicant. You will start with your alien registration number, or A number, or sometimes referred to as your USCIS number. You will fill in your U.S. Social Security number if you have one, and your USCIS online account number if you have one, but you will not need one. For your residence, make sure that you wait until you leave base and have been resettled. You will want to put your more permanent address on the application. In general, make sure to be very honest on this form. You should be honest on every form that you send to USCIS, because lying or fraud can get you into a lot of trouble. Next, you will fill in the rest of your address and personal information. In box 18, if you have ever been in any kind of immigration court proceedings, you will need to check the relevant box. Most of you are new to the U.S., and you likely will not have been, and you can check box A. You will then look at your I-94 to complete your status information. If you were paroled into the U.S., your I-94 will likely say OAR. Your I-94 is your record of all your entries and exits out of the United States. It can be found online if you Google Retrieve Most Recent I-94. You will enter your personal information into the top, and then your passport number and passport country of issuance. If this does not work, you can try using your A number as your passport number. You will then fill out the rest of your entry information. You likely will not have a travel document number. This is typically a visa number, and most of you came here without visas. We'll next move on to your information about your spouse and children. You will list their personal information and again their I-94 records. If your spouse is in the United States and you are applying together, you will check yes. Remember that it is often helpful for spouses to apply separately. You would each check yes on both applications. You will then list your children's information. If you have children under the age of 21 here with you in the U.S., you can include them by checking yes. If they have a separate and compelling basis for seeking asylum, they can fill out an application on their own. You will next move on to information about your background. You will first list your last address in Afghanistan. You will then list your current address in the United States, and then your last 5 years of residencies. This can be in Afghanistan, in the US, or in any other countries. You will then list the last 5 years of your education and the last 5 years of your employment. Make sure to list the dates you attended or worked. You will then list your immediate family, so your parents and your siblings. Remember that this does not mean that they are applying for asylum with you. They would need to submit their own applications for asylum. This is just for USCIS to have a record of your immediate family. Next, you move on to Part B, information about your application. This is where you're going to start explaining why you have a basis for asylum. You will start by checking the grounds. You can check political opinion, membership in a particular social group, and the torture convention. Remember, you can check multiple boxes. So figure out which group you want to apply under, or which ones you have an argument for, and check any that are relevant, including the torture convention. The next question is if you have experienced past persecution. If you have, you will check yes, and then you will explain what happened. On most of this form, you will need to attach a separate sheet of paper, as these boxes are not big enough for you to be as detailed as you should be. You should explain what happened, what exactly the harm you experienced was, who caused the harm, and why you believe they harmed you. The next question is if you fear future persecution. You should also check yes in this box if it's relevant. And then again, you will explain why. The next question is if you or your family members have ever been accused, arrested, or charged in any country other than the United States. If this is true, you should check yes and then explain what happened. Remember to be honest. Next, you will explain if you or your family members have ever been a part of any kind of organization, club, society, military, or other organization. If you have, you will check yes, and then you will explain what these groups were and how long you were a part of them. This would include being associated with the U.S. military or other Afghan forces. Number 4 is if you are afraid being subjected to torture in your home country or any other country to which you may be returned. You should check yes here. And again, you will likely need to attach a separate document. The next question is if you or your immediate family have ever applied for refugee or asylum status before. Most of you are new to the U.S. and have not applied for status here before. You will know if you have. Otherwise, you can just check no. Next are questions about travel through other countries. Most of you came straight here. If you went through a country other than the United States to get here, you will check yes to boxes 2A and 2B and state whether you applied for status in that country, which most of you did not. Next question is if you or your family has ever persecuted someone for the reasons of asylum, including race, religion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group. Hopefully you can answer no, but again, you must be honest. Next, we turn to Part C. The first question is after you left the country where you were harmed, did you return to that country? You should be able to check no. This is important. The U.S. wants to know whether you've been back to Afghanistan since arriving here. As of now, of course, you have all been residing on base. If you go back, your asylum application will almost certainly not be granted. Asylum is based on a fear of returning to your country. So if you return, you are clearly not genuinely afraid. It won't be wise for you to return to Afghanistan until you get your U.S. citizenship. Remember that there is that 1-year deadline to applying for asylum. If you wait more than a year, you will have to check yes, and you should speak to an attorney because your application will need significant help. Next question is if you or your family have ever been arrested or involved in any crime in the United States. Again, you should be honest. The last part is Part D for your signature. Here you will make sure to staple a photograph of the primary applicant. This statement says that you are swearing under penalty of perjury that everything in your application is true. If your asylum application is rejected, you might be put into deportation proceedings. You should not let this dissuade you from applying because for all of you, you already face the risk of being put in deportation proceedings when your temporary parolee expires. The government already knows you are here and that you are only permitted to be here temporarily. Applying for asylum is usually a bigger risk for people who entered illegally and risk alerting the government to their presence by applying, but that is not you. You will get a second chance at seeking asylum in removal proceedings. The last part of the application is signing your name and then stating whether anyone helped prepare the application, whether that's an attorney or some kind of interpreter. If you had someone help you prepare, then they should fill out Part E. This is an example of a cover letter for an I-589 submission. You should list the address that you are sending it to at the top and the date, and then a list of the documents you are including. This should be a completed and signed I-589, your declaration, and then relevant copies of passports, I-94s, Tazkiras, or any other documents. You will also list what other evidence you have collected, whether that's other statements, articles, and the like. You should include an additional copy of everything listed above, an additional copy for every I-589 for each additional applicant. So this would be for your spouse and your minor children. Make sure when you're submitting I-589s for your minor children and your spouse that you staple their photo to each of the Part D parts. You will use a form like this if the petitioner or the applicant does not speak English. It just says that the interpreter swears to the best of their ability that they are competent to interpret and translate either the document or the interview and form into English. They should sign their name. This is an example of a statement from an applicant. You will need to make sure to put your own name at the beginning, and then you will go through and explain everything that happened to you in detail and anything that you think is relevant. Again, make sure that you use as much detail as possible. These statements can often be many pages long. You should make sure to sign your name at the bottom. Asylum can be very complicated, and it's often a very large application. Please find an experienced immigration attorney to help you with it. If you have other questions, the QR code on the left leads you to the USCIS I-589 site. The QR code on the right will lead you to other videos about your immigration status on YouTube. Thank you.